Our next speaker is Karen Holland from St Anne's Parish. And I believe that Karen is going to tell us a little bit of the story of that parish in terms of how do we welcome each other. I was thinking this morning during Archbishop John's talk that, you know, that kind of, you see someone in church and you know them, and you can talk to them, and that's nice. And you see someone else in church that you recognise and then there's the person, and it's usually quite a lot of people, that you see every Sunday, Sunday after Sunday, and it's a little bit too late to go and ask them what their name is. So how to welcome each other. So Karen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm talking about hospitality to each other, and Archbishop John and Sister Elizabeth's presentations today have certainly set the scene for hospitality. When I was putting together this presentation, I kept coming back over and over and over again to one point which I would like to start with you today. And that is that baptism to me was my starting point for talking about hospitality to each other. Because even before the water is poured and the oils are used to anoint, and we speak the name of the child of the catechumen into the church, we welcome them with great joy and claim them for Christ by placing the sign of the cross on their forehead. So I'd just like you to stand again, from this sitting. And I'm going to invite you to speak your name into this place where we will gather. So what name have you been given? And what do you ask of God's church? You have asked to be baptised, and in doing so, you are accepting the responsibility to practice our faith. It will be your duty to keep God's commandments as Christ taught us by loving God and our neighbour. Do you clearly understand what you are undertaking? We do. I would actually like us all to pray these words together now.
We welcome you with great joy. In the name of this Christian community, I claim you for Christ our Saviour, by the sign of this cross.
And now I'd like to turn to your neighbour and make the sign of the cross on the forehead of the person on either side. Thank you. Please take a seat. We often think of hospitality, as Archbishop pointed out this morning, we often think of hospitality as those who are the greeters at the church door at Sunday Masses and the cup of tea afterwards. It is hospitality and it is important, but today I just want to broaden the topic a little bit. I want to use the baptismal promises that we stated just now as the foundation for the story that I want to tell you. The story I want to tell you is just our story. It's not meant in any way to criticise what anyone else is doing. It's not meant as a teaching, but it is just a story, and I invite you to take from it what you will. I'm going to talk to you about the people that we gather with, who they are, what they say, and the place in which we gather. So, the first question is, I guess, is who are we? Discovering who we are can take time. It always involves the opportunity to not only be at Mass together, but also to talk and to listen to each other in a safe space that is respectful and even celebrates our differences. So how do we find out who each other is? Well, in our community, we began by meeting together over several weeks, a few times a week, to talk about who we were, how we saw ourselves, what our dreams were, our hopes for ourselves as a community, a Christian community within the Newtown community, the wider community, and within the world. Out of that discussion came our parish vision. So this was some time ago. Out of that came our parish vision, our vision statement, as well as lots of dreams that different people in our community had for actually being community. This was our vision statement that we came up with probably 9 years ago now. I was working it out, it's a long time. So we decided that St Anne's was a Christ-centred, welcoming and caring community, that we celebrated diversity and spiritual growth and empowered all to share their talents in the wider community. At this initial gathering, we established a community group who was responsible for organising our social gatherings. We decided that we didn't play enough and we wanted to play together. So that group organised parish picnics, feast day celebrations, either at lunchtime or in the evenings, and our annual Christmas social, which still goes on, still go on to this day. They worked really well for a while, and loads of people would come to it. People would dance and they would sing, they would share their cultural dress, they would share their cultural music. We all had a wonderful time, and we began to believe that we were a really close, tight-knit community, and that we truly did celebrate our differences as we put in our vision. But after a year or two, sadly, the numbers started to dwindle. We all looked at each other and went, what's wrong? What are we doing wrong? This was the time when our parish leadership team realised that in order for us to really know each other, our conversations and interactions with one another had to be intentional. We needed to learn how each of our groups wanted and needed to be consulted, first of all, and how they wanted and needed to be included. The first step was to try and identify who the different groups were in our community. So we began by drawing up a list of groups. I've bought some of those lists. It's not exhaustive, okay, but it's how we began. When we became intentional in discovering who our community really was and what our community was really thinking, we discovered something horrific. And I know that that's kind of a very dramatic word, but we were shocked to discover that only a very small proportion of our community was active, had a voice, that was involved in leadership, and it was even visible, seen or heard. Our steps to inclusion was through conversation, intentional conversation. Looking back, I can say that we were fortunate in that we had things to discuss, although I must say that at the time I didn't really feel that we were that fortunate, because what we were discussing were things like the possible demolition of our presbytery. We also discussed shifting parish office from the presbytery to another location. We discussed our parish plan. We always took on the Caritas discussion documents and used that as an excuse always to gather to discuss. So we used any excuse we could find really to come together and share ideas. And I just want to share with you some of the things that we discovered in these conversations. What we discovered was that buildings meant disproportionately more than we ever expected them to. That they're seen as church to a large percentage of our people, and that the conversations, and there were many, about the demolition of our presbytery created huge emotional scenes. We had to be extremely sensitive to those feelings and to walk very, very slowly. It took us 8 years. 8 years. There was an emotional attachment to fittings and decorations within our church by a group of people who were around mostly when our church was built in the 70s. And they had a determination, even though they didn't really understand why a lot of things were the way they were. For example, coloured draperies over things is just a little example. They didn't really understand why things were the way they were, but if they were there, then they had to be right, and we weren't to change anything. There was an undercurrent of resentment towards people and awe. It was it was resentment and awe towards people, believe it or not, who were perceived to be gatekeepers or key holders. To have a key in our parish meant that you had great power. It's like in your place, Unfortunately, with this, went a perception that our people weren't trusted. Some of them felt that they weren't trusted. Our parish is right in the middle of Newtown. It's in the middle of the school grounds, and it is a thoroughfare. It's used by the community of Newtown as a thoroughfare. And I know when I first came to St Anne's, people would go to communion carrying their handbags. We all made sure that nothing was visible in our cars. And there's even a story, and I don't know if it's true, maybe it is before my time there, but it's sort of taken on urban myth kind of thing, is that one day in the Sunday Mass, the offertory people who were doing the offertory procession went to the Queen's table at the back to pick up the gifts, and the wine was gone. Someone stole the wine. So everything was locked. Our kitchen was locked, or everything was locked away, and only one or two people had the keys. And it was perceived at the time, and this isn't a judgment, but it was, or a criticism, but it was perceived at the time that this was necessary to take care of our resources because we didn't have a lot. But in our conversations, we did discover that people believed that they were to be trusted. Probably the most impacted discovery was that there was a longing, and I use that word, there was a longing for people to be able to pray, sing praise to God in their first language. There was a desire to share the music and symbols and prayers of their culture with the rest of our community. There was this banner in our church. Anyone here from St Anne's remember? Way back then. There was this banner made with welcome in as many languages as could be found, and it was made for a centenary celebration. And it was made of quite cheap lining with pieces of paper and double-sided tape stuck onto it. And I never realised how much our community was attached to this beautiful banner. But it got really dusty. And one day we decided that we would take it down because it was actually in the sanctuary, and we were looking at what should be in the sanctuary. We thought, we'll take it down, give it a dusting, and we'll hang it up in the foyer. And as we took it down, they all fluttered to the ground. None of them stuck on the banner. And I discovered that there was a lot of people really angry with me because I'd taken it down. And I'm glad that they were able to express those feelings because it underlined what many people, where English was a second language, were saying to us, that they wanted visible signs of their culture in art, in music, and in prayer. So during the time of our early discussions, we realised that if you came into our church and the community wasn't actually gathered, it would have been pretty difficult to tell what our community looked like. And dare I suggest that a lot of churches that I walk into and I look around, I'm not really able to tell anything about the community itself, which is in contrast to the many, many homes that I've been privileged to visit, as a lot of you probably do. You walk into someone's home and you look around the walls and there's photos and there's often symbols of their culture. Some Guiana community often have special fabrics and special mats in their homes, which instantly helps you connect with the people who live in that home. Now you might say, as I was told as a cradle Catholic, that you can go anywhere in the world and all churches will be the same, and it's always, it was in Latin when I was a child, so everyone will understand what's going on. But of course with Vatican II and the use of the vernacular, that's not quite the same anymore. But still, we hang on to the way we build our churches and the way we decorate, perhaps I should say is a better word, our churches. It's almost like, and I don't like using this so much, but it's the only way I can think of explaining it. If you buy a house that somebody built and decorated 50 years ago, and you move in and go, I'm not touching it. So not only in the lounge, but also individual members of a family will have their own space where they put their stamp on it in their bedrooms, teenagers' bedrooms, the door shut. But everybody's got their little place, and when they come home, they see themselves reflected in their home. So we decided that we needed to take this journey of sharing and being truly hospitable to one another, learning to understand one another, and having it reflected in the way our buildings looked, so that everybody who came in would feel that they were home. So just some of the things that we did. The first thing we did was we decided to increase the use of te reo in the Mass. And I have to admit that it's fairly intermittent, and often it's dependent, unfortunately, and I feel sorry for our priests, but often it's dependent on their confidence and fluidity with te reo Māori, but we do try. And at the moment we have a karanga at the consecration. We try for a while to have other languages, our hymns sung in other languages, and not just by the community whose language it is, but so that all of us, that's our goal and we're working towards beginning there, so that we all sing the hymns with our Samoan community, not just the Samoan community. And a few years ago we had someone who was very, very passionate about this, and he took on the role of ensuring he learnt other cultures' music and sung with them. And during Holy Communion, often we would have other languages sung. Talking to those people, it was emotional for them. They felt that they were cherished by our community. We try and use other languages in the welcome before Mass start. In our Mass, in our parish, our first reading is always in Samoan. Our second reading is always in English. Our prayers of the faithful are in more than one language, and on special occasions they're often in 6 or 7 languages. We use multilingual Stations of the Cross. Now, I'm not talking about, at the moment, the Stations of the Cross that are on the wall. I'm talking about the actual liturgy. That's the word. Is that the word? The Stations of the Cross? Initially, when I first came into St. Anne's anyway, the Stations of the Cross during Lent were held in one language, and only one community ever went. And as different communities started to come into our parish, we realised that they wanted to attend the Stations of the Cross too, but longed to pray it in their language. So we began a process which probably began 6 years ago, and it's still a work in progress. This is a huge work, but I would like to share it with you, and I'd like to say you can have a look at these afterwards if you wish, and we're going to also make them available for you if you would like it in your community. So we have decided that our Stations of the Cross booklet will be scriptural. So we have done it in such a way that different communities can read the Stations of the Cross using their own language, but everybody can pick up a copy in their own language. And I brought with me Korean, Vietnamese, Polish, Croatian, Cook Island Māori, English, Samoan, Te Reo Māori, and Tagalog. Like I said, it's a work in progress, and if any of you speak other languages and would be willing to help me, I would be really appreciated, and so would our community. The Stations of the Cross in our church. When we refurbished our church, we had the opportunity to try and put art into our church to show, if you walked into our church, so that you would know that there were many people, one body, many people who gathered in our church. So a group of people got together and they communicated with our community and invited them to share their culture in a unique way by contributing a piece of fabric that would be used to back the Stations of the Cross when they were rehung in our church. And I'm just going to share a couple with you. We weren't sure how this was going to go because we kept being told language, 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 nothing else, language. But what we've done is we've incorporated language with the fabrics. And the serendipity and the gifts and the blessings that our community have received by sitting down with people and listening to these stories have been unbelievable. This is the first one I just want to share with you. The first Station of the Cross, the fabric was gifted to us by the Māori community. And this is just, we gathered the stories of the fabric as they were given to us. And this is the first Station of the Cross with the Māori fabric. The second Station of the Cross, the fabric was gifted to us by the Samoan community. I'm not going to go through all 14, I don't have much time. I do have a copy of the book that was produced by Caritas that you can actually look at all of the Stations of the Cross afterwards if you'd like to. So the story there of their fabric, and there's the Stations of the Cross. The next one I want to show you is from a woman from Rwanda who is in our community. And this is, I can't read it to you, I'll cry, but it's me, I'm weak. But it is a beautiful story, and this, she stands in front of the station often. I see it there. The next one I want to show you is from the Cook Island community. I will never forget when the mamas bought this beautiful big, we would call it a duvet cover, I guess. They bought it and it was hand stitched. And they said, we're going to cut this up so that this can go under the Stations of the Cross. Maria and I tried to talk them out of it because we just thought this is just too precious. And they said, no, we really want to give this gift. And they gave us the meaning of it. And here it is. You can't see it so well. All of that's appliqued. It's just magnificent. More? No. So we've got those Stations of the Cross. We gathered all of these stories, all the fabric had stories, and we preserved those stories, and we will be actually putting those stories up in our church so that we never ever lose the gift of those. This here is another piece of art that we've put into our church. It is the windows in our chapel, which is be still and know that I am God, and even more languages than we have in our community. And as people were giving those to us, we could see how emotional it was for them. The same as the day that we blessed the Stations of the Cross before we hung it up. People stood in front of our community presenting the Stations of the Cross back to our community and telling the story of the fabric and why it was so important to them. And it was a very emotional, they felt cherished. It's the only word. They felt cherished and loved and accepted by our community. We also have a dedicated cabinet in the foyer of our church, which carries a facsimile of the Treaty of Waitangi, and also a korowai that has been made that we use in baptism when we welcome a new baby into our community. The korowai is used as the white cloth, so that is now in our foyer. We are mindful that we have a school in our parish, and we try in many ways to welcome our children, and this is a dedicated cabinet. Sorry, the lights bounced off it, but it's a dedicated cabinet that the school has the candles with the mercy values on the front, and each time they come in each week for Mass, one of those candles is lit and placed on the altar, and they put their artwork, poetry, and all sorts of things into that cabinet. So it's a living presence always inside our church, reminding us that we have children, and those children really love it. They really know that they're part of our community. Time. Okay. Other areas of hospitality are, of course, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are the ones that just spring to mind, is the way that we have children's masses in our community. We have them on the 5th Sunday of the month, it has 5 Sundays. We also we have a children's lectionary in our parish, which is used in those masses. Other areas of hospitality that we are aware of and are working on all the time are to the elderly and shut-in and sick. And we take the Lord to, with liturgy, the Word and Holy Communion to rest homes in our area, and there's quite a few. And there's a really dedicated team of men and women who do that on Sundays and during the week. And we have 2 Legion of Mary groups in our parish which take up, most of the visiting of the sick in our parish and do it really, really well. The next area I want to talk about hospitality is in leadership. And we realised that we had to be intentional about leadership and inclusion of everybody, and so we developed guidelines. We developed guidelines for lots of things, but this one in particular around our leadership. So of the makeup of our leadership, so that it will reflect the diversity of our parish's ethnicity, parish's age and gender, and sometimes members are co-opted, but we put this as a deliberate thing because it is often, when it gets hard sometimes, doesn't it, to find people for your finance committee, to find people with the right gifts for your leadership team, or they might have the gifts, but they may not have the time. Sometimes it can be really hard, and you just go, oh, whatever, we'll just have this one. He or she's been on that for a long time. But when you've got your guidelines and you keep going back to them, it reminds you to keep looking out, at who's got the gifts and who might be able to, especially when your leadership must reflect the diversity of the community. The other area that we think is important is for people with special needs, both physical and intellectual disabilities. And this can be very, very confronting and very, very challenging. And one way that we do it at St Anne's is, and I know many of you are the same, is that we welcome Amy Lee, who has Down syndrome, as an altar server during our weekday masses and sometimes on special masses when we have it. We also welcome Adrian, who is wheeled in once a week by her dad. She's not quiet, but we welcome her and we make her feel welcome. We go out of our way to invite them to have a cup of tea on Wednesdays, and so that's when they come, and we welcome them and make sure they know that we love having them with us. Just on that Wednesday, we've created a really nice welcoming space, dark, yeah. It's the lounge suite. We took it out of the presbytery. And we brought it down and we put it in the foyer of our church by the kitchen, and since we've had that sitting in there, more people gather, more people hang around, and by the way, we made the decision when we refurbished our kitchen, it doesn't have a door. We do not lock our kitchen. We all held our breath, wondering if things would go. Actually, nothing goes. It belongs to us, and we look after it. We've identified areas that we certainly need to improve on. We do have greeters at the door, but just greeting at the door ain't good enough. So members of our liturgy committee are working on a formation that will expand that. One thing we're not good at, and I hate admitting this, but it's utterly the truth, we are not good at hospitality towards our youth and young people. And it is definitely an area that we want to learn about and do better at. And we need more today than this. I just wanted to give you, over the time that I've had the privilege of walking alongside of our community in this incredible process, is some of the learnings for me. And the main one is, if you want people to be involved, then you've got to be prepared to let them have a say and to be involved in your decision making. And when you work with different cultural communities, you cannot assume that you know or understand their culture, that you know or understand what they're thinking, that you know or understand the best way to consult or communicate with them. You simply have to ask them. And you may not get the answer the first time, but you've just got to keep asking and keep asking and keep asking until they believe you. Until they believe you. Is it easy? I have cried truckloads, and those of you know me say, so what, you cry all the time anyway. No, it's not easy. It is not easy. But it is totally worth it. You know, all the hurt, and things get said that are hurtful, and you'll know this with the new reimagining, you will find this. But it is worth it. It is worth it to release the gift within your community through talking and gathering and talking. The stress is like off the Richter scale, but it is totally worth it because there is a lot of laughter and the joy is just amazing. You know, the work's never done. That's the other thing. I wish it was. Sometimes I wish I've done that, but you've never done it. You've never actually arrived. Nothing stands still. Because the community that we work with today is not the same as the community we worked with yesterday, and it's certainly not going to be the same as the community we work with tomorrow. So all I know is that nothing stands still. You are either going forwards or you're going backwards.